Look, there's no way around it. The Patriots are bad, okay? Like, really, really bad. But after being blanked by the Saints last week, we have reached an entirely new low. 2 weeks ago, I saw this offense up close and personal with my own eyes down in Dallas. SeatGeek hooked me up with pregame field passes, so I literally was up close and personal. And even when just watching this team warm up, they seemed incredibly slow compared to the Cowboys. It was while I watched this game from the stands that I had a very stark realization of just how far behind the Patriots are relative to the rest of the league in terms of offensive talent. It's one thing to be outgunned, but the Patriots just don't have any guns at all. They're basically just showing up to a shootout holding a butter knife. That's how bad it is right now. And unfortunately for New England, their quarterback, Mac Jones, is frankly not good enough to make up for that talent gap. Now, is Mac the only problem? No, there's a lot going on there that's wrong, but he is one of the main problems. And the weight of that reality has now left New Englanders everywhere with a very difficult question to stomach. What do the Patriots do now? Using all of the film and data at our disposal, I'm going to break down this dilemma into 3 hopefully digestible parts. Part 1, how much of the blame for New England's terribleness rests on Jones' supporting cast. Part 2, how much of the blame rests on Mac himself. And last, but certainly not least, Part 3, how much rests on Bill Belichick and the coaching staff. It's a long show today, obviously, and not a very happy one, so, pause this and go get a drink if you need it. A lot of Patriots fans probably will, but strap in. You're going to be here a while. Before I get into part 1, though, I do want to thank SeatGeek for helping to make this episode possible in the first place. Of course, they gave me tickets to see this offense live when I was down in Dallas, which, now that I think about it, seems more like a punishment than anything else that they made me watch this team. But, at the time, it was a good idea. I thought it was a good idea. Wasn't very smart by me. But if you've never been to a game at Jerry World, I highly encourage you guys to do that. That place is a freaking palace. Cannot recommend it enough. I'm hoping to make my way out to Foxborough as well for a Patriots home game one day, but maybe not this season for obvious reasons. If you yourself do have a morbid curiosity to see this team live, though, for some reason, or maybe you want to see some other NFL game that won't make your eyes bleed, or maybe a college game or a concert or some other live event, you can get $20 off those tickets by using my promo code Brett on the SeatGeek app at my link in the description below. It's a really easy to use app. I've had it for years and I love it. So if you yourself are already planning on getting tickets to something anyway, you might as well get that $20 discount. And again, you get that $20 off with promo code Brett. Thank you again to SeatGeek for helping to make this episode possible in the first place. And with that, let's now take a deep dive into what is maybe the worst overall offense in the entire NFL. God help us all. We're going to start with part 1, supporting cast, i.e. the offensive line that is protecting Mac Jones and the receivers that are catching passes from Mac Jones. In short, both groups have played objectively terrible. The Patriots' offensive line has allowed the 3rd most pressures among offensive lines at 86, and that's just in 5 games, mind you, which is insanely bad, and they're allowing these pressures in all sorts of ways. It's not just Vidarian Lowe out there getting beaten around the edge one-on-one over and over again, which of course has happened. It's also blitzes not getting picked up properly, it's stunts and games not getting picked up properly, it's a technical and instinctual issue just as much as it is a pure talent issue, and these protection mistakes have directly led to a lot of struggles for Mac Jones. Just look at the Saints game from last week as an example. This is a 3rd and 6 early in the game, and I want you to pay close attention to how the Pats' offensive line picks up this stunt out of what the Patriots themselves call a load front. Belichick calls this a quote-unquote me game, which is the opposite of a you game, and a lot of other coaches call this a TE stunt or a tackle end stunt because the interior rusher will knife into the B gap first, and then the edge rusher or the end will wrap back around to the inside and hopefully get a free path to the quarterback through the A gap. Now, for good offensive lines and good quarterbacks that understand how to handle rushes like this, they actually like it when defenses call this because it can end up giving their quarterbacks a lot of free space to work with. And I'll use Kansas City as an example here because they're really good at picking these up. This is from the KC and Chicago game back in week 3 after the Chiefs had already pulled a lot of their starters because they were winning by so much, but the starting offensive line was still in, so that's the relevant part. Chicago is again calling the me game here. Not my terminology, that's just what Belichick calls it. So again, you've got the 5 technique trying to penetrate the B gap while the edge is going to be wrapping inside. And just look at how well thought out this protection is from start to finish. You've got the chip help outside so the left tackle doesn't feel the need to overextend himself to get to a wider landmark, so he's staying tighter and a little bit deeper to his guard, Joe Thuney. And meanwhile, Thuney is doing an excellent job of delivering this 5 technique to Donovan Smith, knowing that he's deep enough and tight enough to receive that delivery. And while Thuney is doing that, he's also seeing through that interior threat to look for a wraparound threat from the edge so that he knows when to peel off the 5 technique to pick that up. The goal here for the left side of this pass protection is to not get beat early in the B gap and to not get beat late in the A gap. And if you accomplish that, then it leaves you in this position where the wrapper's getting picked up late and the penetrator's getting washed down inside, which then gives the quarterback all the space in the world to just casually shift himself outside where there's no rusher at all, so that he has all the time he wants to make this throw. If you compare how the Chiefs picked up this stunt to how the Patriots line did it, or rather to how they didn't do it, there's no chip help for the left tackle, so he's going wide and loose rather than vertical and tight. The left guard, Atonio Mafi, doesn't get out to that 5 technique fast enough or initiate contact early enough. He's just being a bit too passive here. So by the time he does make contact with that penetrator, he's already burrowed his way deep into that B gap and he's clearing the inside hip of Trent Brown, who again is playing this really loose and really wide, so there's a lot more space in that B gap to begin with. And now you're in a spot where Brown cannot receive that interior threat from Mafi because he's way too deep into it. So Mafi has to try to stick on him and redirect him behind the pocket, while Brown has to somehow try to stay with the edge threat that's wrapping inside, all while Mac is stepping up away from the penetrator and into the wrapper because he can't just go outside and to his left like Blaine Gabbert did in Kansas City. There's just no room to do that because the stunt didn't get passed off correctly. And then of course, compounding that protection mistake, you have Mac trying to get this throw off anyway. So he's hit while the ball comes out, it sputters into the waiting arms of Tyrann Mathieu, and there you go, pick 6. When you look at the offensive line problems for the Patriots, it's not just that they constantly lose their one-on-ones, which they do, it's that they constantly get beat on stunts and blitzes. Their technique is undisciplined, their communication is bad, their overall protection designs at their core for the fronts that they're seeing just don't really make sense to me, which really is mostly on whoever is actually calling the protections at the line of scrimmage, whether it's the center or Mac himself. I'm not really sure who's doing that in New England right now, but either way, overall, it's just bad. I mean, all bad. But what might be even worse than the pass protection for the Patriots is the weapons for the Patriots. In the absence of Tyquan Thornton, who's been injured so far this year, this Pats receiving core has pretty much no juice at all. In fact, the only receiver to me who has any explosiveness to him is Demario Douglas, but that's about it. Juju Smith-Schuster has no ability to separate or generate explosive plays anymore. Kendrick Bourne is a fine number 3 for most teams, but they're essentially asking him to be their number 1. Devontae Parker just straight up cannot get over the top of corners at all down the sideline, and Mac now has 2 interceptions already while trying to stretch the field with him on fades, but he's so slow that corners are not afraid of him, so they just sit on the back shoulder balls all day long and pick him off. And then beyond the receivers, you've got Hunter Henry, who might be a top 20 receiving tight end in the NFL on his absolute best day at this point in his career. You've also got Mike Gesicki, who's a good contested catcher, but he's only getting like 30 snaps a game because he can't block. Ramondre is a capable yards after catch threat out of the backfield, but you know what? If he's your best option to make something happen on third down, then that's a problem in its own right. I mean, there's just no weapons here, or at least no weapons that defenses are scared of. There's nothing to dictate coverage and therefore dictate the fronts that defensive coordinators can use. There's nobody who can get a quick chunk play to shorten drives and increase their margin of error. There's just nothing. And quite frankly, I don't blame Mac Jones for barely having anyone capable to throw to. That is not his fault. He didn't draft any of these dudes. What is his fault, though, is everything that we have in part 2. These are the Mac Jones specific problems. The stuff that isn't on the offensive line, and the stuff that sure as shit isn't on the receivers either. Going into the Dallas game, before we even saw that disaster live, I was doing some film work on the Pats offense when I was on the plane and came across this play that set off every possible alarm bell in my head. This was the third quarter of the Jets game back in week 3. New England was up by 7 with a chance to make it a 2-touchdown game, and Bill O'Brien dialed up a flood concept on third down against a variation of cover 1 that a lot of coaches refer to as either one cross, one robber, one lurk, whatever name you want to use for it. It's just man coverage across the board, a safety in the deep middle of the field, and the boundary safety coming down to sit in an intermediate middle zone to rob that area of the field. Against this particular coverage, if you're making this throw from the far hash, your best bet is to hold that safety to the deep middle and trust that Pop Douglas, who again is probably the most explosive threat on the team, is going to win vertically on this inside release fade down the sideline. Mac has to take advantage of that opportunity because this is one of the only times all game that he's going to get it. And once he does get to the top of that drop, he can see plain as day that he has that chance. Douglas is even with the corner, which means he's about to get vertical separation, and the safety is still dead in the middle of the field. The only thing that he should be thinking about here is putting his entire ass into this throw to get it outside from the far hash to this pylon where only Douglas can get it. That's it. That's all he should be doing. But instead, and this was really annoying to me, pay close attention to what Mac Jones actually does here. He steps to his left, away from the edge rusher who was in the process of beating Vidarian Lowe inside, and he threw this ball off his back foot unnecessarily, so it ended up short hopping its way to Douglas at the 10-yard line. This play told me all I needed to know, honestly. Mac, in my opinion, had the time and the space in the pocket to make this throw. The protection wasn't perfect, obviously, but he had the space. Instead, he was late in making a decision, which sped up his internal clock when he finally did make a decision, which then caused his mechanics to break down because he didn't want to just lean into the hit and take it for the team, and the ball fell short. I understand that the supporting cast is not great in New England. They're arguably the worst supporting cast in the NFL, but at the end of the day, they are NFL players. They're good enough to give a quarterback a few chances a game to make a difference against a good Jets defense, and it's on the quarterback to pay those few chances off when he gets them. And unfortunately for Patriots fans, Mac has not paid off the chances that he's gotten. One more example here, again from that Cowboys game that I saw live. This play happened literally right in front of me, and I couldn't believe what I was watching then, and I still definitely can't believe it now because it looks so much worse on the All-22. This pocket is perfectly fine, okay? Lowe was able to wash Micah down inside. There's no edge threat looping around here. Matt can just sit pretty back there if he wants to. But literally, the first time he saw a white jersey inside, he full-on took off running. Rather than staying on platform with his eyes and feet pointed down the field, he just ran. His first instinct was to get out of there and effectively cut the field in half by doing so, and then to make matters worse, when he realized that there was nothing open on that side of the field and that he ran from the pocket for nothing, he stopped and then, for some godforsaken reason, decided to throw late all the way back across the field at a corner who had his eyes on him the entire way and his hips and feet pointed at the receiver already. What the fuck are we doing here? Like, I'm not exaggerating when I say that this is the worst pick that I have seen in the NFL so far this year. It's one thing to get picked off by a safety that you don't see, or a linebacker that just appears out of nowhere when you get tunnel vision, or a defensive lineman picking off a screen. Like, that can just happen sometimes. Those are all bad, sure. But nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to running from a good pocket and then throwing late across the field at a corner that is already coming downhill at the receiver. You cannot do worse than that. And this pick six is entirely on Mac Jones for that reason. When you watch every single game of the Patriots offense this season, which unfortunately I have, and I do not recommend it, you see this pattern every week. It's Mac making poor decisions and even worse throws off of late reads. He's not seeing the field quickly. He's not navigating pressure well. He's not an effective deep ball thrower off of play action anymore. I mean, basically everything that he was good at in his rookie year, which made me somewhat confident in his future, is seemingly now gone. That version of Mac Jones that I legitimately thought could work in the NFL is gone. And that brings me to part 3, the coaching staff and front office, or more accurately, Bill Belichick. The reason why I believe that version of Mac Jones is gone is because he has completely lost trust in the roster around him, and quite frankly, I don't think the rest of the building trusts him back either. The organization has failed to get him a number 1 receiver. They have failed to build a good offensive line around him. They saddled him in a very crucial year of his development with an offensive coaching staff that was not actually an offensive coaching staff. And it sounds as though Mac certainly did not handle that dynamic very well in the building. And so ultimately, I don't think Mac trusts the Patriots, and I don't think the Patriots trust Mac. Say what you want about the supporting cast, but when they actually do their job well and they get open and they hold a good pocket, he's just not paying it off. And at the end of the day, this lack of trust throughout the organization and what seems to just be really bad overall vibes in the building, all of that lies at the feet of Bill Belichick. There have been a lot of personnel decisions over the last several years that have not worked out. There have been coaching hires that definitely did not work out. And as the man running the organization from top to bottom in a lot of ways, the buck does stop with him. Will Belichick be outright fired for all of these personnel failures this offseason? Honestly, I'm not so sure about that. But will he quote unquote retire sooner rather than later so that the organization can bring in a young, innovative offensive mind and perhaps a new GM with a new way of thinking about how to approach the draft and free agency? I mean, yeah, that I could absolutely see happening. I think when it comes down to it, Patriots fans who try to distill all of this misery down to just a problem with the offensive line, or just the weapons, or just Mac Jones, or just Bill Belichick, they're all equally right and equally wrong. It's not just one of those things, it's all of them. And ultimately, it might take replacing all of them, and I mean all of them, for the Patriots to finally, somehow return to glory. All right, that'll do it for me today. Before I go, one quick reminder, if you happen to enjoy this and you're still here this late in the episode, not only subscribe and do all the notification stuff and leave likes and all that normal YouTuber shit for this video, but also go check out our podcast channel, the Bootleg Football Podcast. We do TNF streams during every Thursday night game, as well as 2 long-form episodes per week. One recapping the week that was every Monday, and then every Friday we recap preview the upcoming games as well. So if you liked this, maybe you'll like that too. I hope you guys enjoy week 6. We'll be back next week with something arguably even worse because we're looking at the Steelers offense, and oh my God, they're terrible. That one's going to be a rough watch, but you know what? I believe in us. We'll get through it together as a family. I don't know when it's going to be out. It'll be done when it's done, but good Lord, how do Steelers fans do this every year? It's bad, guys. It's bad. So, yeah, that'll be out soon. I'll see you guys then.